So yeah, hi, welcome everybody to session number 7 of the Introduction to Late Egyptian. And today there's a single topic, namely Introduction to the Verb. And that will be our last topic before we actually get started with the Neveu book itself. I think by then we have all the key elements together to actually really go from beginning to end through Neveu. But this is something I wanted to get out of the way first, namely verbs, what are roots? How is the infinitive formed? And finally, how do you then use infinitives to make the first present, which is one of the most common forms of the verb that you'll find in Egyptian, if not the most common, late Egyptian, I should say. So before we hop into that, any questions from the last time? Any follow-ups? If not, then I will just go straight ahead. Oops, or maybe not. Let's try this button. So first thing I wanted to discuss is a root, simply because sometimes there can be a bit of confusion between what's the root, what's the infinitive, and I thought we start that by English. So on the English side, for example, we have a root sing. Actually, you can see that I was thinking Egyptian here. I just put s and ng, but normally in Indo-European languages, we would include the vowels, so it should probably be S-I-N-G, but in any case, take it just indulge me here for a moment. So let's say we have a root, sing in English, and then we can use that to make finite verb forms. Like, for example, he sings, present tense, or he sang, past tense. Finite because it indicates the person, it indicates the tense or aspect, mood, can be multiple things depending on the language, which are encoded in the verb form. And then you can also make all sorts of nominal or adjectival forms, like, for example, sung, the past participle. Was a bit more complex in Middle English, would be something like sungen. So you can see you can form these things by just changing the vowel. You can form them by adding extra elements, like in Middle English, the participle n at the end, which has by now dropped off. And you'll see something very similar for Egyptian in a moment. That's why I have it here. Then there's the infinitive, to sing. And that would be, well, in Middle English, there was singen. Again, it was a bit more explicitly marked than it is today in English. You can have a gerund, singing, and you could have all sorts of related words from the same root, like, for example, a singer, so an agent noun, or related, a song, a songster, etc. So you have the root to sing, then all sorts of finite and nominal adjectival forms, and then, of course, related words as well, outside of the paradigm. Okay, so yeah, just wanted to have that clear before we get started on the Egyptian equivalent. Oops, nice try. So let's look at that in Egyptian. So one example for a root in Egyptian would be gemi, find. Normally only written out with the GM and the M. You hardly see the weak consonant, the E, transcribed with a J at the end of it. So it's a 3-consonantal root, but the last root is virtually invisible. It only comes out in some verb forms. That's why these consonants are called weak consonants, because they don't show up all the time. And we'll get into why that's important in a moment. They influence how some of the verb forms look. Now you can make finite verb forms out of this, like, for example, gimif, may he find, or probably gimaf actually in pronunciation. It's spelled G-M-M-F in the hieroglyphs. But yeah, something like gimaf must have been the pronunciation. May he find, that's a perspective. The simple past is written the same way, he found, also same hieroglyphic spelling, maybe different vocalization, but we just don't know because that verb form did not make it into Coptic. Finally, you can also make the dative or pseudoparticiple or old perfective. There's a whole bunch of different names for that. Having been found, he has been found, gemi, this may have a double reed leaf at the end. And you can make all sorts of nominal forms, like, for example, the infinitive, which we'll need a lot today. And for those verbs which have a weak consonant at the end, a so-called infirm consonant, like in this case, the y sound at the end, they, in Middle Egyptian, would get a T in the infinitive. So it really becomes gimet. Now, as you know, final T in late Egyptian falls off. It becomes inaudible, or maybe it's like a glottal stop. And so it doesn't show up in the spelling of the infinitive per se, but it comes out when you stick another ending after it. Like, for example, to find him, Gimtov, you actually write the T out now. To show that it's really pronounced, they actually write T, W, F. That's how you know it's still there in late Egyptian, but only if followed by a suffix pronoun. And there are other nominal forms or adjectival forms as well, like, for example, participles. I gave you an example of the past participle passive over here. Give me, I think the T is actually superfluous. Let me take that out. That was a mistake. It's written, but I don't think it's pronounced, as usual. Okay. Well, I'll park here for a quick moment because there was a lot of information. Whoopsie. Any questions of? Doesn't seem like it.
Audio, one question, Shailesh here.
Yes, hi Shailesh. How are you today?
Hi. Fine, thank you. Acha, in and nominal and adjective forms, the last part, the second last sentence, you have written gamete, that is to find, and you have mentioned that T comes out, and you have written in hieroglyphs, and then you have written gamete F to find him. So on the left hand side here, yeah, on the left hand side here.
I think I know what you're going to say. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, here. Uh, yeah, just yeah. Here there was no gamete written. So in that case, how to identify it is if it is gamete or if it is not like that, not a gamete.
That's a great question. Just from context, honestly. If there is no suffix pronoun after it, they normally don't write it. Sometimes
Okay.
you find a little Y, like the double stroke Y, written there instead. And I'll show you some examples in a moment. But often you just sort of, and that's where it becomes tricky. I wanted to say you have to know it's there, but since it wasn't pronounced, is it really there actually? In my mind, it isn't. It was there in earlier Egyptian.
So you mean to say it depends on context of the sentence, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
So if I modify the question a little bit, how do you know it's an infinitive? You know it from context, from the overall grammar of the sentence. The ending is most of the time not going to tell you, because most of the time it's not written anymore because it wasn't pronounced anymore. I hope that explains it, and you'll see a few examples a bit later.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Rebecca, I think you had your hand off. Go ahead, hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I noticed that this root is that's three consonants. Is that because it's Semitic like Hebrew, or are there always three consonants?
You're taking my next slide already, anticipating my next slide. So there are, normally they're called radicals, just like in Semitic languages. And you have biradicals, you have triradicals, you also have 4 and even 5. Although the latter ones are rare, very rare. A lot of the 4s are causatives, so you slap a causative S in front of it. And 5 radicals are typically reduplicated, like you have part of the verb reduplicate, and that's how you get up to 5. The vast majority is 3, so that's very familiar from Semitic languages. And then there are some very common ones, which are basically 2 radical, biradical verbs. That's why I only gave 2 and 3 here, because the other ones are less common, but they do exist. So I'm glad you asked, because that would have actually been my next point for today. So yeah, let's go right into it then. Here are some examples of very common biradical verbs. First of all, so jed, the root to say, to speak. The infinitive is also jed, nothing changes. It's just a root, or at least that's what it looks like, because we don't know the vowels. We can only guess if you see different forms of jed, if there was a distinction. But well, in any case, so if you see this, there's the word to say, to speak. In Coptic, jo, the final D has gone away. Another common example is wun or wen or un in Egyptological pronunciation, spelled with a little rabbit here, which stands for WN. I think we had that a few lessons back. And it has a phonetic complement. It has an extra N. even though you don't really need it, but just to reinforce the sound. And then it has a door. Well, it's like the, what do we call that? Like the wing of a door. What's the proper word? If you imagine like a saloon door, two of them opening and closing, that's basically what that is, just tilted 90 degrees. And then since it's an action verb, we put an extra determinative to indicate, well, hand with a stick, so it's an action. It's to open like a door, for example. And in Coptic, this lives on as worn, to open. Okay, so these verbs, the infinitive just is basically looks like the root. The same is true for so-called strong triradical verbs, sorry, words and verbs, no, verbs. Like, for example, sajim or sajim, to hear, spelled with the ear and then an extra complement m. And that basically becomes sotim in Coptic. And yeah, the infinitive is just sjm. I'm sorry, sjm, the underline m. Now we come to the weak ones that you had asked a moment about, had asked a moment ago about, Rebecca, namely, for example, gemi, to find, that's the root, but the infinitive becomes, or in Middle Egyptian, it would have been something like jimit. However, the T is not written anymore, so you can't really tell, unless there's something coming after, which brings the T out, suffix pronoun. In Coptic, this becomes chine, at least in Sahidic, to find. Another very common word is iri, that's the root. It has a weak consonant at the end. That's why this whole class is called tertiae infirmae, so with a third weak radical in Latin. And the infinitive is marked by either a T, or often you can also find it just with that double stroke Y, which just indicates that there was some kind of vowel or glide at the end. And that actually reflects very much how that word sounds in Coptic, namely ire. It's still around, it means to do, at least in the full form if there's no pronoun after, if it's just ire. Otherwise, it becomes shortened dramatically. And yeah, that's essentially what you already find here in the late Egyptian spelling, ire, essentially. You could transcribe that, ire, and then with the Y at the end, iri. The next common one from the same class, also a three radical verb, but with a weak third one, it's ine. And again, the T is normally not written, unless maybe if something comes after, I would have to double check. You just spell that with this little nu jar on top of walking legs. And that stands for in, plus phonetic complement, an N line at the bottom. So that gives you ine. Ine in Coptic, nothing changes. It still means to bring. And the last one, I think, Alvaro, you had asked about this one last time. RD or simply D, the full root is RD, or actually, if you look in some grammars, it will say RG. By this point in time, the G and the D have merged. So I think, if I remember right, Neveu just transcribes it with a straight D. And this one shows both forms without and with an extra R. I've seen both for the infinitive. I haven't been able to figure out if there's any difference between when it shows up with the R and when without. And this verb has a lot of different forms how to write it, depending on the tense, the time when it was written and whatnot. It's one of those irregular verbs. There are a few, like to go, to give, to come. In most languages, these super common verbs have some kind of specialty, like lots of different irregular forms. That's also true in Egyptian. It lives on in the infinitive as D or T in Coptic, and it still means to give. Any questions on these examples?
I just noticed when I was looking at something earlier, just it's very interesting that this to give, that picture, you probably all know this, is a hand with a loaf of bread on, but it's so small. Yeah, so just for anyone watching, it's fun.
Right, it is a hand with a loaf on it. The loaf by itself, when you blow it up and it looks like a little pyramid almost, it's actually some kind of cake. It's also pronounced D. In hieratic, it very often just looks like the hand glaive. So often in context, you really need to know your grammar and vocabulary there to distinguish it from a straight hand, as in the word for hand or in a whole bunch of other words. the ein hand. In hieroglyphs, it's very nicely distinguished by that little bread loaf or cake that you pointed out. Sounds good. And Randy, I think you had a question or comment.
Yes. Would you happen to know if the bigger form of to give, like the the full size triangle with like the little triangle inside of it, would you happen to know if that corresponds, for example, to the Coptic the stative form, like to instead of ti?
You mean, hang on, which one? I lost you there at the beginning. Which
Oh.
verb are you referring to?
So to give ti. So
Mhm.
instead of the bread in the hand, there's that full size form where it's just like the triangle, like a di on, or
You mean this one? I know which one you mean. Let's see if it comes out this way. Yeah, this one, right?
yep. Yeah, I was curious. Like I have nothing to base it off of, but I was wondering if like that corresponds to the, is that used as a stative, or is it just simply
Jesus.
another way to write the infinitive?
That's a great question. And I'm not sure, one of our Middle Egyptian specialists, if you could comment on how that works in Middle Egyptian. I haven't figured it out for Late Egyptian yet. I see that second form less, much less. Usually what I've seen in texts is just one of those two. But I don't know, in Middle Egyptian, is there a difference when which is used?
No. These are completely interchangeable from my experience.
No difference.
Completely the same.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's more like a stylistic thing than like which one you want to use. In a monumental inscription, I would expect this more than in, I don't even know how to write this thing in hieratic.
Yeah, I've never seen it in hieratic as well.
Okay. So that
It
converts
probably has something to do with the with what kind of signs they are, because the hand is like a long and like it's horizontal, and this bread is vertical. It probably has to do with the organizing of space,
true.
which they cared a lot for in writing hieroglyphs, in arranging the space.
That's a good point. You always have that choice to do something else just because you need to fill the column or you need to fill the line. That's very true.
But yeah, from my experience, dit written with just a loaf of bread and the tea, and the hand with the bread and the tea, they are the same and interchangeable. Even in one text, they could be written in these two ways.
Fascinating. Thanks, Nikita.
Yep.
Thank you.
I don't know if this muddies the water a little bit, but sometimes in cryptography, instead of writing the whole image out, sometimes you will just take the actual object itself. So it's kind of like borderline cryptography.
Right. Also almost like borderline picture writing, huh?
Yeah. Like you'll see a man standing upright with a bread in his hand in the New Kingdom, in the late period, but that's the verb be, to give. But you'll see his whole body.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Ptolemaic and Roman writing is absolutely fascinating. I just got this book, a 3-volume introduction to Ptolemaic writing and grammar, and by Dieter Kurt. It's absolutely fantastic. Highly recommended. It's in German. The English translation only has the sign list, but the stuff in there, how they vary the spelling, to your point, it's fantastic. I love it.
I can also point at how the scenes of like making an offering in the temples, well, different kinds of offering, especially in Ptolemaic era. For example, the ritual of presenting ma'at to a god or a goddess, they can write either like the hand with the loaf of bread for D and K, something like I gave you something, or just a loaf of bread. So both ways are fine.
Yep, you have a
And
lot of
and this is arguably a prospective form, like may,
right.
D and K. No, that would be a Sejman F. Sorry. Yeah.
I think once we get to the, I mean, I'm still wondering, is there any, now let's park that. Is there any preference in certain contexts? That whole spelling thing around RG or LD, I think we could go there a little bit later once we're coming to the corresponding chapter in Never. But yeah, for the moment, I think let's treat them as graphical variants. Cool. The reason why I said what I just said is like you have, for example, that form in Late Egyptian with the double hand with the cake. For I think what is that? That's like for the negative imperative, don't give, MDY. So there are some spellings that are reserved for certain forms. But yeah, let's get there. Okie doke. Anything else? I see a question in the chat about the tertia infirme. So that is just, that's not infinitive, but that's infirme, basically off third infirm or unsound radical, the fancy description for basically verbs that have a weak third radical. There are also tertia geminate, which would be with a reduplicated second consonant, but I didn't want to worry about them today. But they also can behave differently.
Yeah, and I apologize for the answer because I haven't seen the third week in your presentation. Sorry, Rebecca.
That's okay.
Cool. All right. So much about what they are. Let's see how we use them. So how do we make a basic sentence? Like, I don't know, I bring you a book, I bring you some incense, I see him, I travel there, whatnot. I mean, basic verbal sentences. Let's get into it. Whoops. Having real trouble with my back and forward buttons today. So what we need for that in Late Egyptian is adverbial sentences in the first present. And we already had a bunch of them over the last few sessions. Namely, we had adverbial sentences with an adverb, like, for example, pa remech im, the man is there. Ta eschimet im, the woman is there. Or if I want to use a pronoun, su im, that would be the basic form of the sentence. Subject and adverb, su im, he is there. In this case, it's a pronoun that I was using here. You can also expand that. Instead of saying die here or im there, I could have a whole full adverbial expression, like, for example, on the way. Su ta meet. Meet, this here is just to indicate that this is something to do with roads or distance or way. And then this is the word itself spelled with a me, reed leaf, and then this is a determinative and a little t at the end. So su tamid, he is on the road or on the way, on the path, however you want to translate it. Both of these are adverbial sentence structures, and they are in the first present. Nothing special indicated about, like, I don't know, past to relative to what we're talking, or future or whatnot. Let's take the noun at the end and replace it by an infinitive, because the infinitive is also a noun in, well, it is. So there would be, for example, pa remich cher sajim. So the man is upon listening. Or if I just want to replace the man by su cher sajim, he's upon listening. And that is the standard way how to say he listens in Late Egyptian. So when you were seeing my question from the page before, if you learned Middle Egyptian before, you may have thought I'm going to say something about the suffix conjugation. Not so. The standard way in Late Egyptian is an adverbial sentence, where you just basically stick the infinitive of the verb after cher, and that's really all. So the sentence structure is cher sejim. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, as I remember, her construction, like here, it can be also a meaning like present continuous.
Yes, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So there's a few call outs on this one. Let me park it for a moment. I was going to gather, I'm just going to go to point 2 right away. In Middle Egyptian, this construction already exists. This is by no means limited to Late Egyptian, but it normally means, or I think it always has like a present continuous implication. He is hearing at this point, at this moment. In Late Egyptian, that is not true anymore. The first present with cher also can mean he hears in general. There's a difference in how those two forms are negated. So there you can see, you can still distinguish like the continuous present from the aorist or whatever you want to call it, different names for it. The like general, I don't know, his rays shine onto the land every day or something, but like those always true kind of present statements. But in the non-negated form, they both use the khar. So that's a great call out there. There's a difference in meaning between Middle Egyptian and Late Egyptian.
Okay.
So for one, this form becomes the general present. You don't use a suffix conjugation anymore. And it also has now an expanded meaning. And I see, Rebecca, you had a question.
Just a general point, because I'm a little bit behind on all this and finding it hard to grasp. When you write out what it means in English, it would really help me if I knew that what you were writing out was the actual thing. So it doesn't say he is traveling north to the Suda festival, or is it saying traveling north is he to the festival of Suda? Just only because that helps me learn as I go along, because when we have long sentences, it's a mystery sometimes to me.
I got you. Okay, great call out. And I think that that's following up also on the idea that Christopher had the other day, like, can we give the literal pronunciation? Let's do that. So let me start at the top though. One important thing to notice is this khar is by no means obligatory anymore in Late Egyptian. As a matter of fact, it's already, it is optional in the 19th dynasty. So you could say paramich khar sajem, the man is upon hearing, or the man upon hearing. Or you could say simply paramich sajem, the man hears, hear. I mean, whatever, however you want to render this now. Literally the man to hear, if you want to say so. That is not defective. That is simply how the language evolves. In the 19th dynasty, the khar is still there optionally. Afterwards, 20th and later, it's simply gone for Late Egyptian. It's not just omitted. It wasn't there, I'm assuming, in the language, because when you look at Coptic, it simply becomes eprome sotem. So there's no sign anymore, no trace of a he. That's what it would be if it were still there. But you never find that in any of the Coptic dialects, to my knowledge. So basically, it was long gone, probably 1,000 years earlier. And so, I don't know, a lot of authors, they put the khar in parentheses to basically indicate, I know what this is an infinitive. If that helps you, you can put it. I personally don't, because I'm just thinking they weren't saying it. And it feels to me like I'm putting infinitives in English everywhere, you know, like to sayin, which is just, nobody says that. It's not there, so why do it? But in any case, up to you if you want to put the khar in parentheses for clarification. Yep, I know this is an infinitive. Or if you just want to leave it out the way that they spelled it. Most authors, scholarly authors, I should say, put the khar in parentheses. So you would be in good company if you do that. Like I said, the meaning is expanded. It can have two meanings, present continuous or general. One important thing, verbs of motions like to go, to go, to come, or in this case, to travel north. There's a specific verb for that. They use m instead of khar if you're talking about the immediate present. They can use khar, or they do use khar when it means in general. It's an interesting distinction. But if you just want to express something that's currently going on, you use m. So for example, in this example down here, su em ched er pa chebset. So su em ched, he in travel northward to the to the Sed festival. Sorry, I wanted to say Hebset festival, but that's kind of doubling it. So he's he traveling north to the Sed festival. You see, it uses m here, not khur. I think if you wanted to say it's generally true, you would put khur here. But this is talking about what's currently going on. Any questions on that one?
Thanks. It's really helpful when you break it down, even if you then speak proper English afterwards. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Cool. Hey, we're doing well on time, half an hour in. Let's see. Yes, sir.
You know, I was going to say ched is a verb of motion, so im ched instead of hair. I mean, you have it. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have it. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right. Yeah, chet would count as a intransitive verb of motion. So that follows under the am rule, which I think is already there in Middle Egyptian. I think that's not a new innovation of Late Egyptian.
It
either.
is.
Yeah, it is. Okay, thank you. I really need to get up to speed on my Middle Egyptian one day. Hoping to get there. So as time goes on, the herd falls off. We just covered that. I apologize. I have no idea what's going on here. Okay, here we go. So one important thing is pronouns. We need some more. Egyptian has a ton of pronouns compared to English. Late Egyptian is no exception there. And when you want to make sentences like these, you already noticed we're using su for him, said for her, plural, said with plural strokes for them. And let's quickly cover the forms for the other persons. So for the first person singular, it's spelled tui. If you look at Zatzinger, he just transcribes that as T, I mean, TJ. I think because the assumption is that the W was never really pronounced. Either way is fine. In Coptic, it becomes T. So that's tui. Female version, exactly the same, just spelled with a female determinative. And in the plural, it's tun, or tun, if you wish. So T, W, and then N. Second person, took, and tut originally for the female variant, but the T's fallen off. So in reality, this is probably pronounced te, and it's written the same way as the first person singular. So you can't distinguish them when writing in Late Egyptian. The second person plural, you plural, would be tuten. And then we just covered the third person. We had that before, su, set, and set with plural strokes. Finally, there is an indefinite version. Like if you want to say somebody is doing something, somebody's talking, somebody's walking, somebody's saying or whatnot, you use tetu or tutu. That's how it's actually spelled. Often it's abbreviated like this, like T with lots of little squiggly lines, which stand for the rest because, hey, who's got time for this? This doesn't live on in Coptic. In Coptic, you just simply say, they are seeing, they are making, they are coming, or whatnot. There is no indefinite form anymore. You just use the s of the plural, but this is very alive and kicking in Late Egyptian. You'll find it in a lot of sentences when you don't want to actually pin down who's doing the thing. Somebody, one is doing, they are doing is how we would translate it in English. Okay, anybody notice how these pronouns are formed? There's something interesting about them.
Yes, from suffix pronouns.
That's right. It's just 2 plus the suffix pronoun. So if we quickly recap from last week, these were the suffix pronouns that you can glue after nouns or prepositions or.
As yeah.
Oh, yeah, you might have noticed my spelling mistake. Apologies.
Actually, not that. Yeah.
Okay. That should have been.
I just saying suffix, this kind of suffix pronoun, maybe they could created from impersonal pronoun to.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Basically, it looks like the impersonal pronoun too, plus the suffix pronoun glued at the end. That's exactly
As
what.
I remember, first it is attested in 17th dynasty.
Mhm.
After actually in the time of Hyksos period, maybe it is something like influence from Semitics, maybe.
Could be, right? Honestly, I don't know enough about that, but there's also these older pronouns in Old Egyptian that start with a T. So there's something going on here that's coming out in Late Egyptian. And it is exactly what you guys said, namely, it's just this two element with the suffix pronouns glued on at the end. So if you have your suffix pronouns down, learning these is a breeze, with the exception of the third person, which is basically su, set, and set plural strokes. And of course, you have to get used to this tutu thing. Tutu, it's so much fun to say. So those are our so-called proclitic pronouns of the first present. They have different names in different grammars. Cherny Groll calls them the preformative pronouns. In Cavalier, maybe an Italian thing, they then called the performative pronouns, which makes me want to do mime. But in any case, whatever you want to call them, I actually like the verse proclitic pronouns because that's what they are. They can only stand before a verb. They don't stand by themselves. And that's why they're called proclitic. You have proclitic, which is glued in front of another word. You have enclitic, which needs another word for them to hang on to. Yeah, that's where the name comes from. Any questions? All right. Well, so here's how you actually use it. If you want to say, I upon hearing, in other words, I am hearing, or I hear more generally, I hear whoever comes to me out or whatever, ti her sejam, or tui her sejam, I upon hearing. Same for the female version, just the spelling changes a bit. In Coptic, this is ti sotem. If you want to make it plural, you use tun or tun. Tun her sajam, and that's still what it is in Coptic. After the her falls out, tun sotem. So if you know your Coptic, this should be very familiar. Second person, tuk her sajam. This one here, the tuk doesn't make it into Coptic. It gets replaced by another construction. So they say exotem. That's something where the two stages of the language are different. However, in the feminine version, it stays exactly the same. Namely, it's te in late Egyptian, te her sejam, and it becomes te sotem in Coptic. So you talking to a woman upon hearing or upon to hear. In the plural, it would be tuten, and that's teuten in Coptic. So tuten her sejam, teuten sotem. Easy enough, right? Su her sejam, he upon hearing, again, it gets replaced in demotic already. And this turns into an F then, so it's a different construction, F sotem. Feminine version, I think it's S sotem. I have not seen this in writing, honestly. I don't know if they collapse the two S's or not. This looks weird to me, but grammatically this should be right. Set chersejim in late Egyptian. And finally, set chersejim, plural. Were these pronounced differently? Maybe, huh? Because they're different in Coptic. This would be se sotem. Honestly, I don't know for sure, but you should be able to tell from the spelling if it's singular or plural. And then finally, the tetu chersejim, which does not survive into Coptic. And that's how you do it. Well, we should probably do a few examples before I go into, I have only one more slide, but I thought we should probably do a few practice examples in between. So how would you say, I say?
We jet.
That's right, teach it. And in Coptic, simply tijo. It's still the same thing. It hasn't changed. How would you say, for example, the boy hears?
Be paseri head. You say here sejam, paheri sejam.
That's right, Paseri Sejam, or after the 19th dynasty, it would simply be Pasheri Sejam. And that would be Epshere Sotem in Coptic, Epshere Sotem. I mean, it's so cool how often you can interchange those two languages. Now, let's see. I'll try to use some vocabulary we already had. I think I had this before. The father finds the letter. I'm trying to make it a bit more complicated.
I can try.
All right, go for it.
Pa-iti hergem.
Right.
Ta mejat.
Yeah.
Tashat.
Tashat. Yeah, I was thinking Tashat. that's perfect. So pait or paiti, if you want to put the final
Yeah,
it's a little bit- Mhm.
paiti her gem
Right.
her gem then tay shot. Yeah.
Right. And let me write that down because that's actually that's a good thing here. So, oh, you know what? We can just take this slide. It's already on there. Let me show you a bit how that works word order-wise. So pait or paiti. Here I had to send. Hab is to send. Tashat, the letter. Okay, and if you wanted to make that he sends it, then you use the suffix pronouns that we talked about the last time. So you would make it pait, habes. So you take the infinitive and you glue the suffix pronoun on there. So you can basically take a noun and replace it by the corresponding suffix pronoun. Why is it se and not f? It's se because it's a female noun. So even though in English we would say it, the letter is female in or feminine, I should say, in Egyptian. And so basically then you have to glue the feminine suffix pronoun on there. Okay, very good. So let me go back to my verb list. What did we not have yet? How would I say he sees the cow? Sorry, really silly sentences, but I didn't make a list. Oh, we didn't have see yet, right? See is peter, pore in Coptic. It's in Middle Egyptian. You may think ma'a. That's not really used anymore. You have now and you have petur. Let's use petur because that lives on in Coptic. So how would you say that? How would you say I see the cow? You see the cow. Sorry, my bad. And I'm gonna open a new slide here.
Are you a man at this point?
Go again.
Are you a man? You see.
Great question. I am. So let's say it's for me. Want to take that one?
Well, I'll try, but I'm finding it hard. You. Okay, so it's going to have a k in it.
That's right.
I just can't remember how to say it.
What do you put in front for those subject pronouns or proclitic pronouns? They have a common element.
Path. Pack.
That would be
No.
for the demonstratives and articles, but for the
I can't remember. Is it ta?
close.
No.
Two. Mm-hmm.
Who took?
So you're right. It has a K in it. So it's oops. I'm gonna do this in transliteration. So the sentence was. Let me make it. You masculine. Great call out.
Masculine singular.
Right. Good point, because in English we just can't keep them apart. See the cow. See would be better. Okay. So how? First of all, if you want to first transcribe it into like semi-Egyptian English,
Yeah.
what's the construction?
You just told me and I've forgotten. I can't remember.
No worries. You use a preposition there.
Oh, a preposition. Sorry, ka. That's all I can remember.
Okay, no worries. Let me walk you through that. So if you want to make it into like fake Egyptian English, it would be you.
Yes, that's helpful.
Okay. So for the you use the tu, and like you said, there comes a K after it. Tuk. Tuk is the masculine singular you.
Her.
Right. Exactly. Her.
I just remember that for some reason. Seeing you was peter.
That's right.
Upon to see, and now the cow. The cow is feminine or masculine?
Let's say it's feminine in this case.
Okay, so that's easy for me because that's the only thing I can remember. That is ta,
That's right.
and then cow. Remind me what that is.
Eche in Coptic and Ichet in Egyptian.
E. Is that how you write a h?
If you don't have the special transcription keyboard on, so let me do this properly. So far I've always used the proper transcription, so this is how you should be doing it. But there is this other convention that if you don't have the special characters, you can just write a capital H for the H dot. That's how you'll often find it on the internet, the so-called manuel de codage transcription. But yeah, let me try to keep it consistent in these sessions. So this is better. And that's really it. Tuk, peter, da, ichet. That's it. Perfect. If I wanted to say this cow.
Tai.
That's right. And if you wanted to say his cow, really stretch.
Pai. Pai.
Perfect. Exactly. So
no.
that's kind of
Sorry.
cool. So you see his cow. That all goes into that little demonstrative article here. And for the pronouns, we just covered it. So for male singular, it would be tuk. For female, it would be tut, but the T falls off, so it's really just tu. And for plural, it would be, anybody know what the plural would be?
Na. Na.
Not of the cows, but of the pronoun.
Oh, you all, as you
Yes,
said.
y'all. That's right, y'all.
Yeah. Thou. Is thou plural for English?
No, the other way around. Thou is actually the singular.
Oh.
Thou
What
makes
is it plural?
ye in would
Oh,
be.
ye. Yes, I remember that. Okay, so you either say ye or you all. You
Yes.
all. You all. Okay. It's going to be something like tuten, something like that.
Something like that. I mean, think of, if you remember, the suffix pronoun plural is ten. Oops. Unless you have Russian on. Tuten or tetin.
Tuten.
Oops.
Tuten.
Yeah.
C is still her, Petra. And what's the next bit? Seeing.
It's the same. Nothing changes. It's all yeah, hetero is to see, and the rest still stays the same. So this is you plural, basically. All right.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And actually, interestingly, when those of you who can do it properly speak it, I'm almost on the verge of learning it by sound rather than by sight. I just need to do some more work to catch up because it's too much to take in.
Absolutely. So what I was thinking, I had a thought on that, which is basically we're going to do one more round of exercises on these before we go to Neveu. It's going to be a bit of a mixture. Some sentences from Egyptian to English. Sorry, from English to Egyptian, and a little reading passage. I have to find one from Egyptian to English, but I think I can probably find something that's already readable with what you guys have learned so far. So should be fun. And then basically, well, I'll get there in a moment, how we continue.
You could make up the story about a man going to milk a cow and then somebody says, I'd rather have beer.
Something very much like that. But luckily, there's already a story I think I can use. I was thinking of using the tale of the two brothers, but I have to see how much vocabulary is in there. But I think it can probably be, the beginning should be pretty straightforward. So yeah, something of that nature. Beer should definitely be in there somewhere. So, okay. So you see how that works. I'll give more examples as a homework. Please feel free to send them in, or rather I'd actually prefer if you could send them in, because then I can see what was clear and what wasn't. Before we do that, the last one, you can digest that one in peace later. I wanted to quickly go over it while we still have a few minutes today. Namely, how the word order works in adverbial sentences. And the good thing is, it's pretty much like in English, with one exception. So generally, you put the subject first, then you put verb plus the verb, or later, simply the verb. Then you put a direct object, like, for example, I give the book. Then a dative object to the man, for example. And then all other adverbial expressions, like, I don't know, in the hallway. I give a book to the man in the hallway or something. I had an example for you here. Pa'it, Kherhab, Tasha'at, and Paifsheri, and Pacheru. I'm not sure, does somebody want to try to break this down? Come on, one of the.
So we
I could
have
put-
the, oh, sorry.
somebody who's a beginner, so it's more slow.
No, we'll go slow. We'll go slow.
Okay, Christopher, it's yours. Although you're certainly not a beginner.
So the father, Pa'it.
Mhm.
Heb is what? Sends, is
Right.
it send down or
Yeah, send down in Middle Egyptian. I think I've seen it just for to send.
to send? Okay. All right. So, or let's do it literal. So I guess the father is sending or in the process of sending, if we do it that way.
Right.
The letter
Mhm.
to his son
Mhm.
in the day.
Right. Now that's an interesting one. Empahero is a fixed expression in late Egyptian. It simply means today. So literally it means in the day. Normally day doesn't get an article. It only gets an article if you want to say today. That's an interesting thing about time words in late Egyptian.
So today.
And that's really it. Perfect. 100%. So you see, it's just like in English. The father gives, or upon giving literally, the letter to his son, in the day or today. So it's the same. Thanks very much. And yeah, then you can go about and add, oh, I see something in the chat. Thanks for doing it literally. Yeah, sure, my pleasure. And then you see, you can replace these by pronouns. So I could replace the father by su, and it would become su, kherhab, tashaat, and paifshere, pacheru. Or I could replace the letter by a pronoun, but those are different pronouns. In that case, I have to use the suffix pronoun. That's what comes after the infinitive. So that's important. The suffix pronouns come as the object of the infinitive, while if it's the subject, you use these new proclitic pronouns. So pa'it, kherhapse, or set. No, the T is not pronounced. Perhapse, pefshere, pacheru. Same thing. Now, you could also replace both by pronouns. I could say shu, kherhapse, pefsheri, pacheru. He sends it to him. Sorry, he sends it to his son today. The one wrinkle that we have that's different from English is if you have a pronominal object, a pronominal dative object. So if you want to say to him, to her, to you, whatnot, then that has to go right after the it has to go right after the verb. So pa'it, kherhab, enef, to him, tashere, empacheru. So in English we would say he sends the letter to him, but in Egyptian you actually say, or the father sends to him the letter today. So pronominal dative objects move forward. They always like to come as close as possible to the verb. That's also the case in Middle Egyptian, and you'll find that rule again. Well, that's pretty much all there, I think, is to know for an introduction to how to use these present one sentences. There's a ton more that could be said about how to use a stative, and Egyptian has a ton of tenses, late Egyptian. Unlike Middle Egyptian, a lot of them are marked explicitly by like little tense markers before that. So you normally know what you're dealing with, which is very comfortable. That's why I like late Egyptian so much better, because it spells everything out for you. So there's a ton more we're going to learn in Niveau, but I think for the moment, this will get you started. You know how infinitives work. You know how the first presence works. And I have a question in the chat. The father sends him the letter. Oh, you're absolutely right. I didn't notice that. We do that too. Great call out. Right. The father sends the letter to his son. The father sends him the letter. Oh, isn't that amazing? We do the exact same thing. I mean, I've long proposed that English is just late Egyptian, but no, just kidding. as a take on those crackpot theories you sometimes find online. But English dative shift, thank you. That is so cool. I didn't ever notice that. Okay, cool. Well, 4 minutes left to go. There's one thing I wanted to point out, namely, where do we go from here? Thanks so much for sticking with this through those preparatory sessions. I would propose what we do now is we're going to do one more exercise. Like I said, translate some verbal sentences into Egyptian from English, just to make sure we have the rules down for that. Read a short passage. I think I should be able to find something that's digestible. Review that together next Saturday. And then on the following Saturday, I'd like to switch over to Neveu. And what I mean by switch over is the way I'd propose to do it is just read a section on from Neveu. I would say, for example, for the first one, we can do chapters 1 and 2 because they're super short. We'll go over the sentences as questions together in the session. And then if there, like I said, if there are any questions, that's the time to discuss. So it becomes more of a group discussion. Let's do the same thing for the following weekend, chapters 3 and 4, which are a tad more involved, but essentially we're talking about the demonstrative pronouns and the possessive articles, which we already had in the session. So this is also more of a recap. And then afterwards, I think we should go basically to a bi-weekly schedule. Exercises 1 week and then reading the next week. That will give everybody more time as the topics get more complex, and also will give me more time to prepare. So it would be a bi-weekly schedule. We have 1 week only homework. Please send the homework in. I'll take a look and I'll post a solution. The following week, read the chapter and we discuss any questions from the exercises in the chapter together. And basically on this bi-weekly schedule, on-off, because I want to bring the reading group as well back in the off weeks. That would be the overall proposal. Any question or any thoughts? Get my little second screen here to see if I'm missing anybody. If that works for everybody, great. If you have any ideas on how to improve it, just ping me directly or send me an email. Or otherwise, I would say let's go ahead with that that plan, and I'll send you some homework. It may have to be tomorrow night, unfortunately. I'd love to do those so that everybody has time on Sunday if they so desire. But the problem is, it's just it will take a bit more time. So I think that should also become easier once we're on the bi-weekly schedule. All right. With that being said, again, thanks so much for joining those 7 preparatory sessions, and we start with Neveu for real, essentially after the review next Saturday.
Thanks so much, Aurelia. You are a star.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks, lots of
evening.
fun.
Have a good one. Talk
Cheers.
soon. Bye.